I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today, we are talking about Challengers, the 2024 film written by Justin Kuritzkis, directed by Luca Guadagnino. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha. Oh God. Oh, sorry. I was doing something totally normal, and then a bunch of techno music started playing. Sorry. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
So we are here in week 3 of our Wicked Winter schedule. Last week, we talked about Sicario. Next week, over on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon, we're going to talk about Network, which I'm very excited to revisit. It's a classic. I feel like people don't talk about it. I haven't seen it in a really long time. And I'm very excited to dive back in and be mad as hell as we watch it. So that's next week. But now we're talking about Challengers. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Yay.
And a happy Challengers to all of you. Okay, so
Challentine's Day is now what, for thruples. I'm just saying. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah.
Challentine's Day.
Okay, so yeah, diving in. This movie is an interesting movie. And I think I enjoyed it both times that I watched it. I saw it in theaters, and then I rewatched it again here. And there are some things that are like very compelling. The chemistry between the two male actors in particular, but all of them, between all the actors, is good. The structure of it, I really like. I think it's a really good example of just simply like put the ending at the beginning and then make me want to know how we got here. And the idea of the love triangle, where you're sort of watching the different permutations cut against the match that's being played and you're progressing, that intercutting of the story works really well for me. There are periods of the time where I kind of zone out or get a little bit like, I don't know who I'm invested in or who I want to end up with who, and who wouldn't be in love with you? Well, me, kind of. You're kind of a mean person. I don't know who I like along the way, except like I kind of want like the two guys to get back together, which maybe they do in the end. That's kind of what's fun about the ending also, that it comes back and does that. So yeah, there are these things in this movie that like I really like and are very impressive. And then there's other things that like take me out of it. Sometimes the music drops are great and hit great. And other times I'm like, this feels like you just put this and slapped it on top of the scene to make it do a thing. It was how it felt to me. So I have pluses, like pluses and some minuses that overall balance out and still make this an enjoyable movie. But it's probably not exactly my cup of tea. Alex, however, do you want to talk about Challengers?
Well, yeah, I mean, you went and saw it in theaters because I was like, Michael, Challengers, you got to go see it in theaters. It's a movie theater movie. You got to go see it. I love this movie.
It's always exactly how people are going to definitely love a movie. If Alex is like, this will blow your mind, it's the best thing you've ever seen, it will cure everything that ails you.
Yeah, it's definitely backfired a few times. I thought my favorite Zendaya movie of the year would be Dune Part 2, but it's Challengers by far. I mean, I just really, really enjoy this movie. And I think I've referenced this movie. There's been a lot of buildup to this episode because I've referenced it a lot in kind of saying like sexiness is back. Like movies that actually are kind of sexy and have sexual chemistry maybe are coming back. I think the like nadir of this energy is like kind of like peak Marvel, where Captain America emerges from a pod and has like a perfect like Ken doll body and somebody kind of like pokes it, but there's like no actual like human sexual energy to be found anywhere. It's just kind of like aesthetics. And I think what's so great about this movie is it just reminded me like, oh yeah, like I can really be captivated by just interpersonal scenes with nothing explicit. There's no actual like sex in this movie. There's no actual sex scenes, but it's so much sexier than so many movies that have like really explicit content. And it's because of just the chemistry of these actors. It's because of these great oneers where we kind of are in a room, kind of like a lot of it is like a stage play, and the screenwriter comes from theater. You have these long, just great scenes of just two people in a room. And there's so many dynamics and so many twists and turns and reversals. And the camera is kind of part of that movement and flow through the scene. So it was just like a whole movie of great chemistry, great energy, great just interpersonal tension. The love triangle where all the corners touch, as I believe the director and writer described the movie. And it was just so refreshing to finally get this again, like in an American movie. Probably no surprise coming from an Italian director. We still need to kind of outsource some of this energy from our European friends. But yeah, I just had a great time in the theater. The music, I agree, Michael, sometimes it drops at the moment where I'm like, why now? But at the same time, there's something about it that just feels playful, and the movie itself just feels so playful and loose and kind of free. It's not too tightly holding on to like its form. It's a little bit just having fun, and I don't know, it works for me. So it's one of my favorite movies of the year, if not the favorite movie of the year. But rewatching it, I'm just like, I love this. I love my experience in this movie, and it's just the playfulness, the cheekiness, the actors, everything. It's great.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, so since you mentioned music, I feel like we have to swing by Brian and say, Brian, tell me about Challengers.
Well, why would I care about the music in this movie? Yeah, I mean, obviously I came into not only this movie, but Luca Guadagnino through Trent and Atticus. I'd seen Call Me By Your Name, but didn't know that director meant anything, or I never followed his career after that or anything. But then I saw Bones and All, which I mentioned on the podcast before, and which I thought was very interesting. It was this kind of bleak drama, romantic drama about people who were cannibals, and where there's a race of cannibals and stuff. And I was just like, what is this movie? But it did a cool thing where it was kind of, for lack of a better term, gnawing at me. And I wanted to watch it again months later. And then I kind of the themes are a little messy. Luca's this isn't even his most recent movie, Challengers. He had Queer come out about 2 months ago, which I also saw in the theater. And I think Bones and All and Queer, the themes are pretty muddy, and there's a lot of stuff there. And I think you have to really kind of work hard to put them together. And I like that Challengers for me was just a movie that I could look at the themes and say, there's stuff there. There's metaphor there. These things are saying things. I'm not 100% sure what they're saying, and I'm going to have to do a little work later, but that's exactly what I want, is just enough to latch onto. And but then not so much that I walk out of the theater being well, I know everything I'm ever going to think about this movie. But yeah, just then after Bones and All, they were we're doing this sexy tennis comedy, and Luca apparently emailed Trent and Atticus and said, do you want to score my next movie? It's going to be super sexy. 2 X's, and or maybe 3, I don't know. And then they were like, yeah, we're doing a movie where it's wall to wall house music or whatever, which it's not in this movie, but that was apparently the pitch and the sort of idea for it, right? So I was like, okay. And I think I heard the soundtrack before the movie came out, and then went and saw the movie, and was just really enjoyed, like I said, just kind of not a hard movie to follow, not a hard movie to latch on to theme wise. It's kind of Luca doing a more mainstream thing, and then just a lot of fun in terms of just the character drama. It's funny, it's really entertaining, and then the music is maybe the first time since Social Network they've had a score that's been this memey and is a thing that people are referencing on Saturday Night Live and all this kind of thing, right? As opposed to just it won some awards or people liked it or whatever. But then yeah, like I said, it's a movie that I wanted to go back and keep looking at and keep thinking about and keep kind of picking it apart a little bit, because I feel like there's a lot to talk to. I'm excited to get into it with you guys. So it quickly went from movie I really enjoyed in theater to being like probably also my movie of the year, almost certainly, because it just kind of has everything I want. I like, I love a good music video, and when that music video is the music is being provided by my favorite musicians, that doesn't hurt. But I also just find it to be like a really compelling and interesting and entertaining movie.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. All right. Trisha, what about you?
I can't wait to talk about this with you guys. I have mixed feelings. On paper, I really like this movie. I love a three-hander. I love a love triangle. I like the play sort of long scene aspects of it. This is a Blacklist script, and you get the sense that when you read it, it's like any actor would just fall all over themselves trying to play these roles, right? Because they have these great long scenes of acting, and they're entertaining, right? Like the character dynamics are compelling. You have the wonderful device of the tennis, which I know nothing about tennis. Like, I need to stress this at the outset. I could not possibly know less about tennis. Like
Same.
It's truly nothing. It might as well be Quidditch to me. I'm like, this is a made up game. I don't know. What is this? I truly don't know anything about tennis. So, but the pressure cooker of a sporting event where I understand that there is a winner and a loser and there's a way to get there. Like that in itself is a smart device. And structurally, I agree with you, Michael. I think, again, there's a lot about this that works. There's a lot about this that also just feels like somebody put a lot of cool stuff in a movie. I feel that way about the score a lot of the time, where I'm just like, but why? Like, I don't dislike it. I just don't know why. And I do feel that way too about some of the thematic things that are mixed into here. Like, I think there's a POV thing that I'm never really with. Like, I don't really know whose movie it is. I don't know why it needs to jump around the way that it does, or like who I'm with at any given moment. I think I read a review of it that was like, this is a movie unlike any other movie, and it's probably really good. And I was like, yeah, both of those things. This is not like other movies. It's probably really good. And I do want to say that too, because I have already been critical, and I will go on to be critical, I can sense, as this episode progresses. But I do want to say that having a filmmaker like Luca Guadagnino, who is not always for me, who is taking big swings at stuff like this, and again, we have original content. Like, this is an original script, really cool original idea by a very talented screenwriter, and tackled with all kinds of direction by this director. It's a very directed movie. And like, I want to celebrate that in and of itself. And the fact that we get to sit here and talk about this among all the other wonderful movies that we're doing this season. So yes to this movie, also questions. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Trisha and I are kind of in a bucket over here, and you
here,
guys
I
are
feel.
kind of in
Yeah.
a bucket over there.
Here to crush our sheer joy over here in this bucket.
Oh, I don't think your joy is crushable. I don't get any sense that I will make a dent in your joy. So you're free to enjoy.
Well, I mean, off of that, like, I will say, I agree with in the sense that, like, I don't always know why certain choices are being made. This movie has a lot of bold. This movie is just bold all the time, right?
Yes.
We're going to do a big push, and we're going to do a big needle drop. We're going to do a big slow motion thing.
We're going to be on the tennis ball, flying around,
right,
back
like,
and forth.
yeah.
The ground is made of glass now. We're under the glass.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of those things where it's always fascinating because people will pick that apart and be like, the reason for that thematically is da da da, and it's like, okay, like maybe, but that doesn't, if you don't actually feel that when you're watching the movie, that doesn't really matter, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot in this movie that I don't know that I think, not how I would do it. And if I were, being asked whether or not to do things a certain way, I might push back a little bit. But like Alex said, it's just like such a fun movie that I don't care. Like it's not trying to be something else. It's not trying to be a movie that's like showing you how good it is. It's trying to be a movie that's maybe showing you how cool it is, or how big it is, or whatever. But it doesn't feel like, it feels like a lot of those moments are just moments of I don't know, fun is the word that it keeps coming back to me. But then I think there are those moments where we talk about this in lessons, like how a movie points at things, right? So it's like when it's just her and Patrick her and Art early on in the apartment, and she's changing the Game Changers thing, right? And then she's talking about like, do you want to actually get the thing back that you've lost? Do you want to be and then like the camera just does this like incredibly slow push in on him, and the music drops and everything. Like that's one of those moments where you're not expecting that kind of music at all. You're expecting it in the tennis parts and everything. But in that moment, it does at least make you go, what are you saying here, right? What does this mean? Why are you signaling this moment quite so much? And sometimes with Luca's movies, I go, I don't know. and it's frustrating that I don't know, but also I appreciate that there's a reason you're doing this. And it's not just, wouldn't it be cool if the guy sitting on the couch right now thinking had a slow motion push in with some house music behind it? Like that doesn't feel frivolous. It feels intentional. I just don't always know what the intention is.
Yeah. It's this movie is such an interesting mix of things, because there are these scenes like we're talking about that are just like classically good. You come in, the oneer that starts with Zendaya and Josh O'Connor like making out, and then it ends with them breaking up, right? Yep. That's like a huge showpiece. And yeah, that's a good scene. Like how you enter is completely opposite of how you exit. And it's all done in a oneer. The performances are good. The flow of action all works, and it's like cool doing classic stuff. And then on top of that, there's like crazy music drop that happens. And I feel like it doesn't take away in that scene. It is highlighting like a change is happening, right? Like all the times when the music comes on, it is on a beat that's like something is changing, right? This is important. It's just not the score you would conventionally use for that moment. So like there's an awareness of like story is happening and I'm telling you the story and I'm using this tool to tell it. And it's just interesting because there are moments where it's like, yeah, bam, exactly, you did it. And you clearly know that story is happening here. But some of the time it's like, but it feels like maybe this choice was more motivated in a like keep the audience awake and excited kind of a way, is how I felt with some of the music drops that like didn't feel like it enhanced the scene. It was sort of just like we're still going, like music, like pay attention. And so it's just such a weird mixed bag of like, if that was like an isolation, if there was a short film that did that, I'd be like, okay, well, you've lost the audience and you're trying desperately to get them back, is how I would feel. That's what I would project onto it. And so there are these moments in this where I feel that, but then there's these other moments of extreme confidence where you're just like, you have my complete attention and I'm wrapped when she goes to the hotel room for the first time. And it's the three of them on the bed, like that whole sequence, that whole scene, I'm just like lost in the tension of this and what's going to happen. So yeah, it's just this interesting mix of like hyper confident, nailing it things, and then other moments that are not confident, but feel maybe like trying to compensate and are harder for my brain to square.
Yeah, there's something interesting with certain directors, and I think Luca is enough of an auteur that I think he falls in this category where, you watch a David Lynch film and something very strange and jarring will happen, and it's hard to analyze, like, did he mean to do that? Is that an accident, or like is that bad or good? It's like, I don't really know if it kind of defies all those normal categories of analysis, because he's also just kind of this wacky artist who's just trying stuff out and seeing what's, like, I don't know, what will happen to the audience if I do this to them. And I get some of that playfulness from Luca, where it's I don't think he's always making choices in this kind of like more, we talk about Sicario and how, oh my God, the opening shot of Emily Blunt, the light passes perfectly over her face from the window of the SWAT car. I don't know if he's operating in that Roger Deakins kind of mindset. There might just be some fun of like, I want to slap the audience in the face right now just for fun. And that, you may not appreciate that as a choice, and that may not feel like a valid choice to make, but I think that's almost how I read him sometimes, which is just like, there's more of just a feeling or a fun or a playfulness. And so, some choices feel like everything's perfectly lining up to deliver the perfect thematic punch at this moment. And other times, why not be on the tennis ball, and why not be below the court, and why not just like go crazy with this final tennis scene? And so it's hard for me to judge any of these kind of wackier choices as like mistakes or like even problems, because I don't feel like that's how he's approaching them. It's more just like he's just having fun, and that can work for you or not work for you. But for me, I was having such a good time in this movie that I was kind of down to go on whatever ride he was taking me on, including these kind of maybe otherwise bumpier moments.
Right. He's also an incredibly fast filmmaker. He's had 2 movies come out this year. He's like already working on the next 2. At least one of them is going to come out next year. And the early cuts of some of his movies are like 4 hours long. So I think he's just kind of out there just shooting stuff and trying stuff and just getting people to do it. And then we'll kind of figure it out later. So I do think that there is that loosey-goosey kind of feeling to his movies. And I think that's especially why his less mainstream movies like Bones and All and Queer feel messier to me. Challengers at least feels like it's a little bit more put together, but it does feel like he's not second guessing himself, like you were saying, Alex. He's just kind of going like, I'm going to do this idea, and then we're going to move on because I got another movie to go make next week. You know what I mean? Like, right. So it's like, I like what he's doing, but at the same time, I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, genius. Like you really, thought about this forever. And even the score, it's interesting because a lot of times Trent and Atticus won't score to picture necessarily. They'll kind of work on some stuff. They'll like see an early screening of the movie or read the script. They'll go just make some stuff, and they'll send it to the filmmaker and say, what sounds good? What's working for you? Da, da, da. And a lot of times, whether it's Fincher or Luca, they'll just be like, oh, we just started putting that music in the movie. Like, they're like, oh no, we were happy to score to picture, but you just took what we sent you and just started using it, right? And like, as you can see in the Social Network, Fincher's like, no, I'm just going to cut the scene to your music. Like, I'm going to do it the other way around rather than cut the scene and then you score it. And obviously the music in this movie is really cool and like was very popular and everything. And I love it. But at the same time, I don't know how much they actually did other than like make this palette of music
right.
and send it off. And then Luca's like, I'm going to put that there. I'm going to put that there. I'm going to put that there. And not that there wasn't obviously back and forth. And there are, like there's those slow piano cues that then have like a beat under them. Obviously, there are some cues that feel like they're made specifically for a moment. But I think there are others that was just like, go make an LCD sound system album and send it to me and I'm going to put it in my movie, right? So then when people are like, oh, how come it didn't win more awards? Like, it won the Golden Globe, but then didn't get nominated for an Oscar, which is it doesn't always happen that much. And it's like, I love the score and I love how it's used in the movie, but it's not like a normal composer who's going to spend, 10 months, like looking at every single cue and scoring the picture and trying to figure out exactly what the right little mood is here. And they will do that for some movies. It just very clearly in this movie, they just made some stuff that then Luca was like, sure, thanks, I got it.
Yeah. As I say, because so much of the score does feel like, just that house music slapped on over a scene, which works a lot of the time because of the kinetic energy of these scenes. The parts then when it really kind of comes to the fore for me are those moments where the music evolves with the scene. I think there's a couple. There's the scene where there's kind of a total chaos in the music as Tashi is walking away from Patrick's car near the end during the windy night, and then turns around and there's this real like change in the music and a development into the kind of from like crazy
choir?
drums. Yeah. Or maybe I'm thinking of the wrong one, because there's that. There's a couple moments where it goes from crazy drums to kind of more just like smooth synthy, like more melodic chords, and there's kind of this like escalation in the music. So it's weird because the music, because there's also the
children's choir,
choir that is like
yep.
that is dropped a couple times in the movie, and also like there's kind of a instrumental version of it as well that's used in the movie. Anyway, so now I'm getting scenes mixed up and where these crazy cues were being used. But I found that it was interesting that there were parts of the movie where it did feel just like a generic house music backdrop, and then suddenly it would surprise me when it did sync up with the scene, and as a revelation or a reversal would happen, the music did change, and those were really satisfying moments because there was kind of this almost like always on feeling of the music before those moments. So basically my point is, I agree the music feels slapped on and kind of not custom tailored for the movie in a lot of ways, but then it made those moments stand out a lot more to me, and they felt like bigger moments because there was this kind of just like undertrack to the movie that suddenly was responding and heightening in this moment, and that was exciting.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said, just generally speaking, about, sort of counter programming, right? Where you subvert an audience's expectations, it keeps them off balance, it keeps them curious. And that's generally a good thing. It makes choices more interesting. And so I think the music often is just going for that. And I don't necessarily fault the impulse, because again, I think it's smart and it can add surprising depth to movies that otherwise feel cookie cutter. Not that this is ever in danger of that, to be super clear. But speaking of curiosity, in watching it, the music is maybe the most curious thing that I was like, it made me want to look up the history of electronic house music and relationship to sports, tennis. Does it have some kind of is there a reason? What is its makeup musically? I was just truly, why? And
just horny young people music is kind of how I read it.
Sure.
A movie made by 50 and 60-year-olds saying this is what young people are.
Yeah, surely. But then you have that, and then you have, a juxtaposition with these sort of choral numbers. The one where Tashi is sitting under the tree after she's blown her knee out. And the children's choir is singing "The Water is Wide," which is a traditional, and it's really beautiful. Kind of again adds this layer of poignancy, and you're sort of ruminating on the loss of Tashi's childhood dream, because that really is the part. And I believe it's after that scene where there's actually a dip to black, which there are not really very many in this movie, if any others. I could be wrong, but yeah, there are those moments which feel a little counter programming, but thematic, right? Where it's clearly getting to here's a children's choir, here's Tashi, she's losing something that she's dreamed of since literally childhood. And we know that because we saw her as a child, right? As a teenager, longing for this thing and having to let go of it. And it's interesting, the lyrics of "The Water is Wide," it's the first verse of it. But it's "The water is wide, I cannot get o'er." And, then it ends with "We both shall row, build us a boat. We both shall row, my love and I." And, you can see in that moment, again, it's doing theme. She's going to hitch herself to art because he's going to play for both of them. And she's made that decision. And he even says it in the words later, right? "We both shall row, my love and I." He says, "I know I'm playing for both of us." So the music there isn't doing something expected. It's not doing a big cinematic score, but it is doing something very deliberate in the lyrics, in the choice of the children singing, and in what the scene is conveying in terms of the character journey. So I like it. I love that stuff. That's beautiful. What is the rest of it about? There's so many other moments where it just feels scattershot, right? Where it's like, it doesn't feel like it's being crafted with that intentionality. And I don't want to belabor that point because you guys have already made it very eloquently. But it is that much more frustrating when I'm really trying to do like an earnest thematic read on this movie. And I think there are a lot of interesting themes in here that are supported at multiple points, but they don't ever quite coalesce into one thing. And that's the same way that I feel a lot about the directorial choices. So that's also a feeling of being like, well, I'm trying to just make it all fit. And it doesn't quite all fit. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's very much what I was saying about Luca's other movies that bookend this one is that same exact feeling of like, I see you are saying things. This is not just a movie that's not saying things. You are saying a lot of things. I'm just having a hard time putting them all together. And there's clearly like a novelty, I think is a word we need to throw out with the music and the directing of this movie. Like there is a sort of like, wouldn't this be weird and different that's going on here? And I think it works in the sense of, this movie got in a lot of people's faces in a way that a lot of people liked, you know? But at the same time, sometimes novelty and not always going to be like the most thematically cohesive thing.
Yeah. Well, and so it's interesting. I also want to talk about the screenplay and the story. Like the style is obviously, as we've said, bold, in your face, doing lots of things a lot of the time. But I feel like the moments where the style throws me, I'm still hanging around because I want to know what's going to happen. Like the story, the script is sometimes better than the directing for me, and like doing that work of making me want to keep watching. And as I've said, there are moments where they're working totally in tandem, and it's super, super fun. And so, yeah, we've called out this sort of structure where we open on the end, basically, right? This like match. And so a lot of the first third, probably first act-ish of the movie is kind of like trying to figure out what even is going on. Why am I watching this tennis match? Who are these people? And kind of the way it's presented, there's some like misdirects, right? Where we meet Josh and he looks like he's kind of this like homeless poor person sleeping in his car.
Josh O'Connor.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Josh O'Connor. Patrick, thank you.
I feel like every character he plays should be named Josh, though, because he's such a
Very
Josh.
Josh. He really is.
Prince Josh, you know. But yeah, so there's kind of this like puzzle section of like, what is going on here? And then you kind of get it. And then there's sort of the middle section where like a tennis game. And I know a lot about tennis. My dad played a lot of tennis. Tennis was always on in our house. And so it was fun to like see a tennis movie and see that, using the back and forth of a tennis game to kind of ping pong the story back and forth also, and like have that rally happening of, keeping track basically of like who's winning, like Tashi's love also being intercut with, the game, all that kind of stuff. And then, having it all come together with the finale where you get the final reveal, the payoff, the thing that was set up that they, hang a lantern on it and then it comes back and it's, hey, there it is. But it's so fun to then be like, okay, and now we're here and now we're going to do it. And now we're playing tennis. And like, it is kind of like undeniably fun once all of those threads like come together and it all hits. And a lot of that, I think, is just the structure work of the story, of like when we're finding out what. At the same time, I do feel like there are moments when I'm detached from theme of like, I'm not sure what this is about. And I think in the end, it's about tennis is a relationship And this is like an insight into like a true moment of like passionate togetherness. Like we are in this like moment together, all as one. It's kind of what I get from it. That's a sports thing and, you know, a love thing and a human thing. So that's cool. But I lose the theme at times, and I lose protagonist for a lot of it. And some of that I feel like works in its favor, where you get to kind of shift like, well, who do I want to win the girl or win the tennis or whatever the thing is that's happening. But the downside of that is that at some point I'm sort of like, I don't really know that I want any of you to do anything because you've kind of all been terrible at this point. So those are I think the strengths of the screenplay, but also some of the things that drop off for me when watching it.
It's interesting thinking about these three characters, because ultimately it feels like Tashi is the protagonist to me in the kind of the latter parts of the movie. She's the one taking the actions to, you know, meet with Patrick secretly, sneak out at night. She's the one kind of in this dilemma where Art seems by the end of the movie to have made up his mind. Like he really is done. He doesn't want to do this anymore. He's really just doing it for her. He's asking her, will you still love me if I lose tomorrow? It's almost, she's the one struggling with, what do I do with this? Because I don't know if I will love you if you lose tomorrow. Maybe this whole relationship is really me just trying to have a career through you. And I love the kind of the human, like the really crappy humanness of those dynamics. Like I love when movies kind of identify these icky things that are just very real in relationships and in friendships and dynamics, where it's just, you realize maybe too late, too far in, oh no, this was built on something that maybe isn't the right thing. Like this is not built on a pure love. This is built on a lack that I was feeling, a thing that you were, you know, filling in for me. And if you can't provide that anymore, what does that make us? What are we now? And I think the design of the characters is so cool, where you have Patrick, who just doesn't care at all, basically. Art, who is much more of like a people pleaser, is kind of a perfect match for Tashi once she has her injury, because he's somebody who will kind of be her what's the word?
Surrogate?
Yeah, exactly. He's somebody who would be willing to kind of like subsume himself to be her surrogate. That's his personality. You know, even when they first all meet at that party, he's really trying hard to like say the right thing and to impress her. Patrick is kind of just mouthing off and saying whatever, and, you know, not worrying about things. And I think the dynamics of that trio and who Tashi is drawn to at different points, depending on what she needs, you know, but depending on her, where she's in her journey, makes me think that she kind of is the pivot point of it all. And those two characters, Art and Patrick, don't really change that much. I don't know if Tashi changes that much either. She kind of is forced into different phases of her life based on the injury and the things that happened to her. But yeah, so I also don't know who the protagonist is, if there is a protagonist, but I do find myself at the end of the movie, it seems like it's about what's Tashi going to do and how does she feel about her life and her choices. And I love that it ends on her, and you have that final shot, you know, where at first you can't really quite tell, but she's going, come on. And then you see the smile come on her face and kind of like this pure joy. And I just love that the movie ends there with that. It's one of those great movie endings where it feels like it ends at exactly the earliest moment it could end, right, for all three characters, and not a second later.
Yeah, you make me think of Before Sunset, where I've talked about movies that end the moment that the dramatic question is answered. We go to credits and that's it, right? Challengers is different because you then walk out of the theater going like, wait, how do we read that moment? What happened there? You know, and then as opposed to like, you know, baby, you're going to miss your plane, I know, where it's just like, okay, we have all the information we need right now. But yeah, no, I think I read this almost as like, Tashi is the protagonist, but the guys are the main characters, because it's like we're always in their POV. We're very rarely, I think, just with Tashi. We're often just with we're often just with Patrick. I'm sure we're definitely sometimes with Tashi, but it feels like most of the time we're kind of seeing her through their point of view. But as you said, she's the one who changes. I kind of started, the first time I watched the movie, I sort of read her as like the two guys as the angel and devil on her shoulder that she is trying to balance, essentially, right? Like, what's the first thing she says when she meets them? Oh, I know you guys, fire and ice. Which one's which, right? And I just was like, that's a thing. That means a thing. And then, of course, she has this struggle where it's like she likes she should be with the safe guy, but then the not so safe guy is way more attractive, and then she's kind of always balancing these things, which is like I think there's a lot of things in this movie that work on those levels, where it's like you could look at it as like, yeah, that's how we are with relationships. We don't like the same, but you could also look at it as just like good versus evil, tempting versus whatever, like just general metaphorical thematic stuff that we can apply to anything in our life, where it's like the thing over here is more tempting than the thing over here, which is the thing I should do. And then at the end, of course, the alleyway scene of Patrick saying, like I'm the one that I think you actually want to be involved with, not like necessarily romantically, but in terms of her career and what she is trying to go after. And then the car sequence where he's just like, I don't mind that being a jerk, and like everybody is trying to find themselves, and everybody's sort of pushing away the truth. And then in that final moment, it's like everything is kind of feels like everything's in place now, where then she has that, because it's like the come on of like, this isn't fair. And then also the like, oh no, the synthesis, like my angel and devil have like found each other and are like, maybe things can actually be okay now, was my reading of just like the whole Tashi of it all. And then there's all of the three pairs of relationships between these characters, where you can look at each one of those as like what it's doing within the character drama, but then also what it's saying about the things the way that we pretend to be versus the way that we actually are, and living vicariously through others and needing someone else to make decisions for you, all that kind of stuff. It's like you can just be like, here's what these literal characters in the movie are dealing with. But you could also zoom it out and say, but like, here's kind of a way to think about life or think about your own relationships through that, in the way that any good drama should encourage you to do. I just rambled a lot at the end.
Yeah. I'm just going to say at the outset, I don't know. I think like there's so much embedded in the movie thematically that it's hard to like, it sounds kind of like a jumble of melodies, and I don't know if I necessarily hear one like emerge as being the true theme of the movie. It really reminded me of Whiplash this time when I watched it, thematically, where it seems to be in many ways about like, what does it take to be the best? And the people who push you, right? Like, and Tashi seems to be in search of that for herself. And then when she gives up that dream, she's in search of that for one of the two of them, and then is kind of orchestrating, what it takes. It's interesting in that opening scene when they're in the hotel right at the outset after he loses, and, she kind of is like, yeah, what do you want? And she's like, yeah, we could just be rich people. We can just like, whatever. Or you could be a tennis player. And you get this sense of the expectation from her. And, she even says, what's it going to take? Like, what is it going to take for you to win again? Like, what do you need? In many ways, it feels like the movie is asking that question. Like, what does art really need to actually care about the sport enough to win? And it turns out we know the answer as the movie unfolds. But yeah, I just think that theme is interesting to me. Some of the other ones you have highlighted, I think, are definitely present and really interesting. I don't know how I feel about the idea that Tashi's the protagonist, given how sidelined she is, right? Like, the nature of tennis is that men and women don't get to play each other. And so, like, she's never on the court with either one of them. We don't really see, like, she's held up in the beginning as this great talent as a female tennis player. And we see her, I like the moment where she, like, beats that girl, right, Anna Mueller, like, early on in the thing. And then as, like, much later in the movie, they're like, Anna Mueller's she's going all the way this year.
Mm-hmm.
You just feel the, like,
the announcers literally say, like, there's no one who could stop her.
There's no
or something
one who
like
can
that.
challenge her anymore. Yeah, exactly. So, but it is such a shame that it ends up in some ways more being about this friendship and the, like, different phases of the friendship evolving over the years. So there's just a lot to unpack, almost too much to unpack in terms of theme. And again, moment to moment, I think what's going to happen in their relationship is compelling. I don't know at the end of the day if I can, like, sum it all up, but that's only something I care about. Most people don't care about being able to sum their movies up in a sentence. So most people are down for this experience, which is this.
Yeah. I think I would be more okay with that being the case if the movie didn't highlight thematic moments so hard at times.
Right.
Like, it feels like it really wants me to, like, see it and feel it sometimes when they call it out. The finale, right? Like, we're saying that last shot of her saying, "Come on," is a callback to her when we first see her play tennis, and she yells, "Come on." And, afterward they talk about that moment. And it's like, yeah, for 15 seconds there, we were really playing tennis. Like, that's what it's really about. You don't really get it. And that does feel like Whiplash. That's a cool, like, callback of, like, oh, this, like, real authentic losing yourself in your art, in your expression, in your sport, whatever it is, being truly in the zone.
His name's Art, by the way.
Yeah. So anyway, so, like, ending on that, to me, signals, like, oh, this is what it takes, like, to have a good, like, this is the next game of tennis she got to saw. It was like this shot that we just watched and we were in the ball for, like, that was tennis. So, like, we got to experience that. But what is that a metaphor for exactly is, like, then kind of murky and unclear. And so I agree that I feel like there's a lot of thematic things happening in this movie. I just feel like I'm always placed on the wrong side of the room to, like, appreciate them, or, like, I can't quite to, like, reach them, and that's, like, frustrating for me at times.
I mean, I think you were identifying something at the start of this topic, which was, what is this ending about? It's about that losing yourself in the flow, in the moment, this kind of ecstatic, transcendental thing that happens, and that's also words we use with, like, ecstatic romantic experiences and love. And so I think that is kind of a through line for me in this movie, because it does feel like so often these characters are searching for this thing in each other. So it's like the two boys see Tashi play, and they're drawn to what they see in her on the court. Like, they want that. They're drawn to her because of her, not just because she's attractive conventionally, because of her energy on the court and whatever's happening there. And you see, when Tashi essentially breaks up with Patrick in that scene, you can feel like she wants to kind of, like, know that he is somebody, like, aiming as high as she is in kind of that Whiplash competitive way. Like, she's trying she's kind of poking him and testing him of, like, do you really care? Are you really taking this seriously? Are you really going to go for it? And she's kind of repelled from him when she senses that he's not really taking it seriously. He's not really going for it. And then with Art, she can no longer directly experience this thing. She's trying to use him as that surrogate to experience it through him, he's kind of almost becoming dead inside and has lost that magic, that spark, because of how has this pressure to basically be her surrogate. So I don't know. There's a through line for me in the movie of just like people chasing this thing and using each other to try to get to the thing, and being very frustrated when the people they're using are not delivering. And that's why I think my instinct was to say Tashi is kind of the central driver here,
right?
Because it's her need, her desire for this thing that she can't access directly anymore, that kind of causes a lot of the love triangle conflicts and problems for the friendship. I mean, she says she identifies herself as a homewrecker a couple times in the movie. And I think that homewrecking happens really through her desires and what she's kind of putting on these two guys at different points. And when she's tempted by Patrick later in the movie, it's because he's proposing to her, I can be actually a better surrogate. Like, he's dead inside now. He's lost his love for the game. I have one great season left in me. Do you want to feel that thing again? I can deliver it to you, even though you kind of despise me in so many ways. I can give you the drug that you're looking for. And I think that finale is like all three of them together get to experience the thing. And it's kind of like, maybe it will never happen again. Maybe that was all they ever got, but they got it. And so that's their kind of happy ending. It probably will fall apart moments later, but for that moment, they're all happy.
Yeah, off of that, I have a quote from Luca about the ending where he says that they are acting out for 13 years the possibility of going back to that hotel room to find again that beautiful moment of burgeoning desires and innocence, and at the same time to feel at ease with one another the way they were there. So throughout the entire arc, that's what they're trying to do. And finally, with the rivalry at that heightened level, the triangle finally found itself sitting in the same place, but now on the court. And I do feel like that's where tennis does kind of serve as like a check-in for how they're doing, right? It's I make bad jokes but I don't even try. But you know, it's like art needing to find that anger and that sort of drive and everything, and then Patrick bringing that out in him, and then now he's able to play that tennis that he's able to play. You know, it's kind of like they're all moving around this point and trying to find that exact place where they're all kind of happy and comfortable with themselves and comfortable with each other. And that in that last moment, it feels like we see that finally happen. And that's also why the tennis is now good tennis, essentially. And again, like thematically why we're on the ball, because it but that doesn't matter. But I do feel like that is where the tennis matters in this movie, is the idea that like they are literally better at it when they are better, more comfortable with themselves and each other.
Yeah. What do we think about the fact that there are no actual sex scenes in this movie? Because I feel like I was sold a false bill of goods a little bit.
The trailer was like, this is a threesome tennis movie. Let's go.
So sexy. There will be so many sex scenes in this movie. No, there will be 0 sex scenes in this movie. And a lot of unnecessary male nudity.
You mean a lot of male nudity?
Unnecessary.
Yeah, come on.
We're balancing the scales here.
Okay. I mean, listen.
This is what happens when a gay filmmaker makes a sexy movie.
I hear that. But also, I don't know. It just like, it's so, it seems like a very deliberate choice to me, is what I'm going to say. Like, it seems like almost in some ways we're bending over backwards not to have a sex scene in a movie that is about this, right? Like, the old saying, right? Or whoever said it, like, everything in the whole world is about sex except sex. Sex is about power. This movie feels like that in a movie, but yet it feels like we're really, I've seen a couple of Luca's other movies. They're not quite so cut around it, pretend it didn't happen.
If you want to see a whole lot of sex, go
it.
see Queer, because there's just a whole lot.
Male nudity. Yeah.
I mean, listen, I just am interrogating the choice here, because it does start to feel really pointed.
I wonder how much of it is also like how much sex was there in the script, how much was brought to it
Sure.
by the director. You have an A-list Zendaya who maybe has like a line that doesn't feel comfortable crossing. Like, so I could see it also just like some sex being injected into it and by the storyteller. Not that it would be absent in the story, but like pulling out of it the passion and the tension of making the scenes what they are in the execution.
I mean, it is her
them.
climactic choice. Like that is the choice, right? Like she is leaving
the car sex,
the car scene. Yeah, she is leaving to specifically like you know.
Got the children singing. That wasn't enough. That didn't.
Children singing with choppy slow-mo making out.
Well, again, I just wonder. I'm not necessarily saying it would make it a better movie. I'm just saying it felt like a choice. And also, yeah, like Alex, you know, you were saying at the top, like sexy movies are back, and I'm like, yes, I'm here for that. But are they?
Hey, it's still a sexy movie.
Yeah. Well, because I think.
Well, and I know. I know that Luca did add the scene where the two guys kiss each other.
Right.
Actually, in the hotel room, that wasn't in the original script. So,
which I feel like reinforces the idea of like it might not have been that sexy of a script, and it was made into a sexy movie. And then the marketing was like sexy.
and a gayer movie for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. The not all parts of the triangles touched as much, I think, in the script.
Right.
Yeah,
The screenwriter said, "Oh, he meant literally the points touch." But I will interject real quick that the Best Picture winner seems to either be Anora or The Brutalist, and there is a lot of sex in especially Anora, but The Brutalist there's a lot of sex maybe time wise, but that's because there's a lot of everything time wise. But yes, there and we had like Nosferatu and The Substance and Blink Twice and Baby Girl and Queer. Like we are definitely in a very like sex comfortable place right now compared to where we were a decade ago.
Yeah, that's a fair argument.
Also, isn't Gen Z complaining about that though? Don't they not like it? And they're like, get the sex out of our movies.
Yeah. Well, because in 15 years we'll be where we were 15 years ago, where the people of that age will be complaining about it, and then there'll be no sex for 10 years, and then Gen whatever will be like, now we got to bring it back.
It's the 10-year sex cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what's interesting?
Time is a flat circle.
I got some insight talking to a Gen Zer about this topic, and like, and because he was saying like, oh yeah, I didn't need that sex scene. I'm like, what? Why is everybody against sex scenes? And I think it's actually like the oversaturation of porn, where it's just like I'm so hypersaturated with like hardcore porn since like a young age that I'm just like over. I just don't want sex in my movies. Like that's for the porn over there. So I think there's kind of this sad thing of just like, I've seen so much porn, I don't need more porn in my movies. Which is, I never thought about that as kind of like a reason behind what seems to be kind of a...
Right, but that wasn't true in the 80s and early 90s when we were in the same situation.
So I don't know. So, I don't know, man. Maybe it's just like this weird like hyper categorization of like movies are this, porn is this, whatever. What I will say is that when I say sexy movies are back, I think it's like, I just feel like I haven't seen that many mainstream movies with like a bunch of young actors where I really felt great tension and desire and chemistry between them like this. Like, and so yes, there's not explicit sex in the movie, but I've seen a lot of movies with explicit sex in them over the last 10, 20 years that were not sexy. That were just, I mean, I thought about this a lot where it's like, there's that Sundance movie sex scene where it's like no music, raw sound only. And it's just like
actors dry hump for 10
minutes. It's like aggressive dry humping in the most like cold clinical setting possible. You know, it's like, look how real this is. It's like not sexy at all. Yeah, but you're super naked and you're like super definitely having sex, but like not sexy. And so to me, I would prefer movies. I don't need them to go all the way to like showing me the explicit intercourse if the energy is there between the actors and the situations are such that the tension is like that palpable. That's what I mean by sexy. And I think this movie was just like a nice, refreshing, mainstream, big, wide release movie with big, desired actors like Zendaya that just like had that sexy energy. And I don't need there to be like a super hardcore sex scene in there because because it's not about that. It's about the energy.
I think there's a middle ground. I just want to say. Like, sure. I'm not arguing.
I would have been fine with like a sex scene. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm also not arguing for like the very gritty, uncomfortable Sundance sex scene. I don't.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody actually wants that.
Tommy Wiseau's ass up and down for 15 minutes.
No.
I'm just saying, like, it's starting to feel like you're just frustrated. It's just frustrating on purpose. Like, I don't know if it's part of if it's part of the storytelling, which it feels like it would have been here. Then you're at a certain point not doing it for some, and to your point, maybe it was a contractual thing. Mm-hmm. I know Zendaya was a producer on this. Maybe she was just like, I don't really want to do it. And everyone was like, okay, Zendaya. But it's like, it starts to feel like it's an outside thing where like, if it's part of the text of the story and it's part of the theme of the story, it's the character journey, it's the character choices. Like, then if it's not in the movie, it starts to feel missing for external reasons in an odd way. That's all I'm saying.
Why don't we go around and say what lessons we're going to take away from Challengers? Brian, what's your lesson?
Well, we talked about it a lot, but I was just thinking about the way that we can call attention to things in movies, and that's like a tool. I'm going to call it like pointing at things, right? Or hanging a lantern on it, as we say sometimes. And this movie is an interesting, as we've talked about, this movie is interesting in both the ways that it does it well and the ways that it's frustrating, where it's like you just did a slow-mo push in score drop thing. I don't know why that moment means something, but apparently it means something. But those are all tools that we have, and that's like an important thing to remember is how are you telling me what all of the things in your 2-hour-long movie, how are you telling me which things I should be looking at a little harder than other things, right? And I do think this movie is an interesting example of just like they are being used, whether or not they're always being used in a way that feels helpful. Honora has a little push-in moment that's just like, it just has this little... Something's changing right now, and we'll talk about it. Maybe it has more than one, but there's just one that like just stuck out of my mind as being like a little bit of like a pay close attention to this little beat, and then the other way that we can call attention to things is with endings of movies. I was immediately thought, how many of my lessons or just things I talk about in life are like, what No Country for Old Men did well. But like Challengers is a movie where people walk out of the theater being like, wait, who won? Wait a minute. Why did she say this? But then like smile, like, what does that mean? But like the movie is asking you to ask those questions, right? The movie is asking you to walk out of the theater or sit on your couch or whatever and go, wait, that meant something. What did that mean, right? As opposed to, well, everything was wrapped up and I'm going to walk out and never think about this movie again. I want to be talking about it on the way home. I want to be going for drinks with a friend and kind of putting it together. And the reason I mentioned No Country for Old Men is Tommy Lee Jones' monologue at the end, right? Like if that had happened maybe going into the third act of the movie, it would be one of those things where like the second time you watch the movie, you're like, oh, I think I should probably pay attention to what that's saying. Or like you're watching a video essay and you're like, oh, I guess that monologue was meaningful. I didn't really think about it at the time or whatever. But no, that monologue happens and then the movie's over. And like I just like immediately the next day, I've talked about this twice on the podcast because we've talked about that movie twice. But I just like immediately went home and was like, it was like I need to look up what he says in that monologue to like figure out how to ascribe meaning to the rest of the movie through that. So yeah, I just think in general, there are lots of tools that we have both in dialogue and in directing and obviously in music and in editing and like almost anything, any part of a movie or any art form can be used in a way to point at something, to draw attention to it, to make you say, look at this thing a little harder than the other things. And that's just, I think, my lesson is not necessarily do it how Challengers does it always. My lesson is remember that that's an important tool that you have, is to point at things. And if you point at things too much, it's overbearing. If you point at things too little, then maybe people aren't going to realize you were saying anything at all, So it's like find those moments to point at things that mean something that you want people to really be thinking about and really be looking at when they are trying to kind of parse the meaning of your movie.
This is a big season for those kinds of endings because both The Brutalist and Honora have endings that are like, okay, let's walk out of the theater and talk about that.
Yep.
So excited to talk about them.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a great thing to call out because that's the director's job, right? That's the storyteller's job, is to like guide the attention of the audience, and that's one of the things that's unique about the medium of film, is you can really focus the audience's attention on this shot, on this sound. Like, you have complete control over their sonic visual experience, and so of course you should be focusing on that. And I think it's really easy to not and forget about those things. But as you're saying, this movie is good at pointing and letting you know that it is pointing. Third to last shots are also really interesting for some reason. I feel like pay attention to third to last shots. Sometimes those have something special in them. Trisha, what's your lesson?
Yeah, I think this is a great movie to study for character motivations. And particularly in terms of, like, I want to say dialogue, but also tactics, right? Characters walk into scenes wanting something, or at least good characters in good scenes walk in wanting something, and then they usually have to try a variety of tactics to get it. And I think that this movie is great at knowing exactly what its characters want at all times in every scene. And that's what makes the dialogue interesting and compelling, because you're following the tactics that the characters are using to try to get the thing that they want. And sometimes we're privy to what that is, or we can guess what that is, and the tactics themselves are entertaining. Sometimes the motivations are hidden. And so we are wondering what the motivations are, and the tactics are kind of hinting at it. I like the moments in this movie where the characters' motivations are basically forced out, or like everything else has been, laid out or just like expired. There are no more tactics to use. The only thing left is to just say the thing you want. And that's always, kind of the hinge point or often the climax of every scene. But I like them in this movie. They're almost always effective. They're really well done. The one in the hotel room is where Zendaya says, "We're out of beer," right? Where the guys have been trying to act like they don't want what they want. She has already shown up in the scene. So her choice to even be there has sort of revealed her motivation. And then like everything else has just sort of wound itself down. There's nothing left except for her to say, "We're out of beer." And then she's going to stand up and go sit on the bed. Right. And then also kind of direct them with like, okay, they get up, they sit next to her on either side. And then she like kind of grabs them and like basically controls it from there on in. And again,
which is what she does to everyone the entire movie, by the way. Like,
correct.
I mean,
stuff like that is a great microcosm, right, for who the characters are in other ways. But that moment is really great. The one where the Applebee's scene, where she's out with Art and they walk out to the car, right? And then eventually there's truly nothing left. But he's like, "I just really want to kiss you right now." And he just has to say what it is that he wants. But the movie has kind of earned it because we've seen the tactics, we've seen everything else unfolding, and then it's all kind of just like laid bare in that moment. And like every sort of back and forth dramatic scene just pushes the characters to that point, but the motivations are always like trackable, and they end up coming out in the text. So as a scene writer, you know what the scene is about from the outset. You have the characters and the way that they're designed. You understand the tactics that are available to them as they try to get what they want. And then it goes, the scenes themselves, like the drama kind of grinds itself out until it's pushed to its climax. And of course, the scene in the windy night in the car and everything like that is a really good example. Where they're arguing. She comes in announcing essentially what she wants, right? Like, "I want you to lose tomorrow." And then has a variety of sort of tactics to get to that. Now, the character motivation there is a little bit muddy because we're not really privy to what it is that Tashi actually wants. But that in itself is compelling. You can feel the dramatic work being done on the part of the screenwriter, being done on the page, being done within the characters. And so it's always going to be interesting. And pretty much every scene here is worth studying for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I feel like maybe I'll piggyback on this also because I want to let Alex wrap it up because this is his movie. The importance of casting we've talked about a lot. And I feel like, as you were saying, there's a lot on the page that's doing excellent character work and making everything compelling. And then on top of that are these really great actors that, as you've called out, Alex, have this palpable chemistry with each other that's just enhancing everything. And I feel like especially the relationship between Art and Patrick, I just loved. Like, there was something fresh about seeing like a male friendship that was like that. And so like vulnerable and open and honest but like totally believable, relatable. I love the scene where Patrick is coming to visit college and Art is basically trying to sabotage his relationship, right? And like there's a moment where it's like, oh, is he gonna fall for it? And then Patrick just like calls him on it immediately, and it's just like you little snake. And like he loves him for that. No. Like there's this weird like that the scene can end up with like an expression, like yet another expression of their love for each other, even in this like sabotaging moment. Like they're still friends, there's still this connection. And I feel like it's really, for me, was like the hook of like these two people, their relationship is special, it's funny, I'm involved in it, I want to see how this plays out. And I think it's partially why I'm sad that it's sort of, you know, the story is then about it falling apart and falling into the background and Tashi sort of taking more of the center stage. But just I feel like the casting is just undeniable and the directing of the casting. I feel like there's also all the supporting characters that we meet in the first act are, I was going to say, they don't really work for me. I feel like a lot of them felt like a little like fake. I didn't quite believe, like there's a lot of like the people, in the store or the shopkeeper or the hotel people that felt like didn't quite feel believable to me. And the two guys who come in the hotel are like, I don't know, I think he's kind of cute.
Those
are
the ones that feel kind of like cartoonish from like a more slapstick comedy or something. Yeah.
Right. And so it's just interesting the juxtaposition there of that. Also, these characters are all really young, and I didn't believe it at all when they were supposed to be like in their 30s. Right. I was like, these kids, they look like they're playing dress up. So that was hard. But otherwise, the chemistry between all of them is undeniable, and you get that through really good casting and directing. And so thumbs up on that.
It's interesting. Yeah, you mentioned the supporting characters, and I was about to be like, yeah, there's so many great little character actors, because I loved the African-American woman who like is eating the bagel sandwich when Patrick comes in, and she just feels like such like a human, like a normal person. And I love the person who plays Tashi's mom. Just feels like
I really liked her.
Just like a real grandma. Like so, I actually found that a lot of those like kind of bit parts felt nice. Like I the cast people who seem like real people, I guess. I guess you didn't like the performance. Yeah.
I don't know about Zendaya's bestie who plays the referee in the final match. That's like her real life best friend.
The sassy one.
I liked it.
I loved the unexpected choice that he was that.
Not really an actor. He's not really an actor. Yeah. He's just like Zendaya's best friend. And I think it's a really interesting choice, but like he's in the movie so much, and I don't know anything about him. Like it just feels, I don't know. It feels like it's calling attention to something that never pays off into something in some ways.
Yeah, to me, maybe it's just part of that, just like that, the Luca fun of it all. This is not who I would expect to be
refereeing
the ref
this tennis
at this tennis match. But he has this kind of confidence about the way he's calling the shots, and it's not in the voice or the style you would expect, but it's kind of great because it's whatever it is. I don't know. There's something about it that totally worked for me, actually, in that kind of we're on this ride with this Italian filmmaker who's just like doing stuff and having fun.
He's just making choices.
He's making choices. Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah. Alex, what's your lesson?
Well, I'll talk about the scene with the most gratuitous male nudity, or not gratuitous, depending on your opinion. But the sauna scene, I think, is a really important scene in the movie. It's kind of late in the movie. We haven't seen
Sauna scene,
Not the one in the locker room,
scene.
which actually has more.
Oh,
Right.
sorry. Yeah.
No.
The important dry sauna scene between with just Art and Patrick, and kind of near the end of the movie before we return to the climactic tennis match. That scene is just fun because there's this weird power play happening with body language, with Patrick kind of just walking right up to him like totally naked and putting his leg up and drying off. So there's that just like fun body language. But I think what I love about that scene is that it's the two of them, it's Patrick kind of reaching out towards Art again in kind of his dickish way with his personality. Yeah, okay. We're doing a lot of accidental puns. Yeah. It's a very dickish way to reach out. But there's a real vulnerability near the end of that scene where Patrick kind of does what you're talking about, Trisha, where it's like we're kind of beating around the bush.
Look, during the earlier sex conversation, you said wide release, and I just let it go, so it's fine.
Beating around the bush. And Patrick kind of like has a moment of vulnerability where he really expresses how much he misses Art. And it's like Michael, you're saying, it's like these guys have this great loving friendship, this really intimate friendship, and they've been apart for now like a decade, and haven't spoken. And they had this special thing that has been lost because Patrick won that game and then hooked up with Tashi, and then that started to pull them apart, and it all went from there. And I loved how in that scene we kind of were reintroduced to this longing on Patrick's part, and Art I think also has that longing, but is more hurt and is better at hiding it and trying to put up a facade of, no, I'm a professional, you're a loser, we're not in the same league, I'm out of here. Whereas Patrick is actually still reaching for that thing they had. I think it's really important to have that scene before the end of the movie, because we have spent so much time with them apart, as you were saying, Michael, where we might have forgotten how much they loved each other. And I think that's a really interesting scene of them trying not to express the longing that they still feel. And Patrick is the one that kind of like finally breaks the facades and kind of like says it out loud. And Art isn't ready to admit, that that's still there. Anyway, so as Trisha was saying, all these scenes are really good scenes. And that's another really good scene that I think is really important to set up the ending of the movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And lots of puns can be generated from it while talking about it, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, the competition aspect that comes with like a sports movie also, right? Just that extra pressure is that thing that makes it's the competition for like Tashi in this case, but also their opponents are going to play each other. So there's a certain amount of like, well, I can't let my guard down. I have to be thinking about how this is going to play out on the court. And that's making it harder for me to do what I really want, because like, it's too scary. It's too vulnerable to like really say what I want.
Right.
And that tension subtext when it's there is, just extra great. Awesome. Well, I want to hear what else you guys have been watching before we go to what we're watching, though. Quick reminder that next week we're going to be back talking about Network over on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. Very excited about that. Patty Chayefsky inspired Aaron Sorkin. He's like my grandfather of nerdy screenplay people to look up to.
He's your grandfather. Yeah.
He's everybody's grandfather.
Yeah, surprise.
Yeah, watching Network for the first time last year, I was just like, oh yeah, Aaron Sorkin's just been trying to make Network. Isn't there?
Oh yes, basically.
Yes, which he's not shy about, and it is clear when you watch it. Cool. What else have you guys been watching? Trisha, what have you seen recently?
Sure. I have an old movie for you guys. I recently saw for the first time White Heat from 1949, which is a James Cagney movie. And Virginia Mayo. It's great. It is like a gangster movie. I've never even really actually seen a movie like it, where it's a crime thriller drama. The central character is a psychopathic criminal. And it's kind of about like a crime spree. And at one point, like, he goes to jail for like most of the second act of the movie. And then there's like a big climax. He busts out, and it's all about like loyalty and who you can trust and paranoia and all this stuff. It's just a really great crime drama. And James Cagney is wonderful in it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see very many movies with this like structure or in this story form. There's also like a weird amount of like, at the time, like modern crime fighting tech, where they're like, we're going to put a radio signal on the bottom of this car, and then we're going to have 3 cars flanking it, and we're going to draw vectors on a map. And it weirdly takes up an amount of real estate in this movie that you're just like, well, okay, we're still tracking the car. Here we are drawing lines on the map. But it's the kind of stuff that, nowadays would probably spend that much time in any sort of crime thriller, like talking about the tech of it all. But yeah, I mean, it's iconic. This movie is iconic. James Cagney's performance is iconic in it. He's really going for it in a number of ways, and it's got some old movie-making bravado to it. There's a scene in the prison mess hall with like 600 extras, and James Cagney's like losing his mind, and it's just like, the scale of it couldn't be like more impressive. The performance is super big. It's wonderful. So strong recommend from me, White Heat, 1949.
Nice. Okay. Brian, what have you been watching?
I watched a French film from 2023, which was released in the States last year, called Humanist Vampires Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person.
Say more.
Which, well, I will say it's not just a clever title. That is the, if you want to know what the movie's about, it's about a teenage girl born into a vampire family, but she doesn't believe in violence, and like, but needs blood to live, but doesn't want to hurt anybody. And then she meets a boy who maybe doesn't want to be around anymore. And they kind of like think they could help each other out in this weird way. And obvious, metaphors ensue about coming of age and falling in love and, becoming sexually active, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it is just a really funny and entertaining movie. It's 91 minutes. It's just a really good time. And then also occasionally poignant and occasionally moving. But one of my favorite movies of the year so far. So yeah.
Say the title again?
Oh, I must. Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. I don't even need to write it down because I've...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, humans, we're something.
Aren't we though?
Yeah.
We make things.
We make
sure do.
all kinds of things, and then we talk about them. Alex, what have you been watching?
So I, like probably many, many people, I'm watching the new season of Severance, which has been a long time in the making, a long time coming. It's such an interesting show because, it's widely loved, I think, for a lot of good reasons. I think the cinematography is just a feast for the eyes. It feels like the perfect Apple TV show because it just has such an Apple precision and aesthetic, all the way from like the set design to the performances to just like the stillness of a lot of it feels very like classy Apple. And it's a show that I both am really intrigued by the world and want to understand and want to know more. But then I'm also like having lost flashbacks and having those feelings of like, is this really a world that can come together and make sense? And is there a reveal that can actually explain the mounting pile of questions I have? There's an inner world in this movie, the world of the innies. There's an outer world, and the outer world like also has like a million questions about like what kind of reality is this place. I the show, it both gives me confidence that they do know what they're doing and there is a plan and it is going to unfold. And then other moments I'm like, how can this fit into that plan? I don't know.
Goats.
Yeah, is this just really weird to be weird? I'm on episode 3 of the new season. By the time this comes out, there'll be more episodes. Episode 3 ended in an interesting way that promised kind of like a new twist on what's going to happen moving forward. So I have an open mind. I'm still enjoying it just for the sumptuous visuals and filmmaking. And I really want it to be a world that ultimately makes sense and comes together in a satisfying way. And I really hope they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because that would be great.
I'm very excited to see where the love triangle that was set up in episode 3 goes. And that's all I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel basically exactly the same. I rewatched all the first season and loved it actually more in some ways on the second watch, which surprised me. And the first season just ends so amazingly that I was like, I wish kind of that the show just ended there. And knowing that was originally what the plan was, and then they were like, oh, this is good, let's make more, has me worried. But also, from my understanding, they were shooting a lot of it all at the same time. So maybe they at least wrote a whole thing and have an idea of the full story of the season anyway. But I'm also curious, have the same concerns, but also just love so much about the show at the same time. So we'll see.
What are you watching, Michael?
I, over Christmas, watched Lucy and Desi.
So
this
really?
is a documentary directed by Amy Poehler about Lucia Ball and Desi Arnaz, and goes into just like their whole kind of history. It's sort of like exactly what you would expect or want from a documentary about like people like this, where you get insights into where they started, how they met. And so it's sort of like a love story arc, but also obviously how they rose to fame and prominence, and goes into details about their backstory that I knew nothing about, and also just how much power they wielded in the industry. I think was not clear, it wasn't clear to me. And watching this, it was like, oh, they owned like everything, like all of these like shows and spin-offs, like Mission Impossible, like all these IPs came originally like from their studio, and then it was sold and then became owned by other things. But so it's just a really fascinating story of a really fascinating relationship, and it's a look at show business and these incredible people and the kind of mark that they left. And it's like a well done documentary, like just pleasant and like enjoyable to sit and watch it. So highly recommend Lucy and Desi. I think it's on Amazon Prime.
Nice.
Yeah. Cool. Well, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. This has been our conversation about Challengers. We'll be back next week for Network. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to our patrons that make this show possible. If you want to help us make more episodes and get access to all of our Patreon exclusives, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link for that is in the show notes. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Wuerth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Rand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you in the next episode for Network.
Bye, everybody.
Happy Valentine's Day. I'm making it happen.
Oh boy.
Bye.